This area has some of the best food, the widest variety of different cultures, national landmarks, and some of the best career opportunities across the whole entire country. Some would even call this area the next big tech hub, anchored by Amazon HQ2 locally here in Arlington, Virginia. The question is, what does it actually cost for you to live here in Northern Virginia? Is it worth it? Can you even afford it? Well, the short answer, like so many other questions that we get, is it depends. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video so you can figure out which data specifically relates to you in defining your cost of living here in Northern Virginia, and then you decide whether or not it's worth it. I think it will be. Hey everyone, my name is Paul Kim. I'm a realtor here out of Northern Virginia. Welcome to my channel where we talk about anything and everything related to moving to Northern Virginia, living in Northern Virginia, and just stuff related to Northern Virginia in general. Before we continue to today's video, make sure you take a moment to subscribe and hit the notifications, turn them on, so you will not miss out on any of the important information that we share on one of the greatest places to live in this entire country. Now, before we get to the actual numbers, there are two things that we want to point out. Number one is that Virginia is very diverse, particularly Northern Virginia. Super diverse with different kinds of people, different kinds of cultures, different kinds of everything, including neighborhoods. Now, the reason why that's important is because in each area that you live in, the cost of living could differ actually pretty significantly. Now, the plus side of that is that because it's so diverse across this area in Northern Virginia, even just within Fairfax County, depending on where you choose to live in this county, you can define your own cost of living while being close enough to DC and wherever else you want to be so that you can afford it. And number two, going off of number one, is that because there is so much diversity in this area when it comes to cost of living, we're going to narrow our focus down a little bit into Fairfax County, Virginia specifically. Now, one thing that you want to remember about Fairfax County is that it is one of the wealthiest counties in the entire country. Usually top 3, sometimes top 10, depending on which list that you're looking at, but it is one of the wealthiest places to live. So don't be surprised by the cost of living, but also don't be surprised at all the amazing things that you get. There's a reason why a lot of money comes this way. The first thing that we want to look at when it comes to cost of living is housing. It's going to be one of the most expensive, if not the greatest expense that you have living in this area, and it's going to determine your cost of living, period. If you're looking to rent in this area, how much does it actually cost for someone to live here? Just to give you some average numbers, a one-bedroom apartment in Fairfax costs about $1,693, about $1,700. A two-bedroom apartment in Fairfax costs about $2,000. If you're trying to buy a house, Fairfax County, like many other areas across the United States, the housing market has just been on this steady growth track, increasing every single year in terms of home value. A medium home price is currently at around $720,000. And this is as of June 2022. Like we said earlier, it's going to be a little bit different based on what kind of house you want, how big, where it's located, etc., etc. But that's kind of the average. Now, going with housing is the utilities. You can't have a house without cable, internet, and TV and all this other stuff, right? Basic utilities includes electricity, heating, cooling, water, garbage. Generally, it's about $150 for a 900 square foot apartment. But if you add internet, I mean, who doesn't want internet? It gets to about $200 a month. I probably spend more on food than I do on housing. So here's what it breaks down to. An inexpensive restaurant in Fairfax costs about an average of $18.38 per meal. Now, if you get a 3-course dinner for 2 people at a quote-unquote mid-range restaurant, it's going to run you about $70 without alcohol or dessert. Transportation is another big one. Now, in this particular area, there's a ton of options for public transportation. Now, for the most part, though, because of the way that this land has been laid out, most people that live in this area, they're going to have their own personal mode of transportation. And so what's important here is that as of November 2022, the average gas prices for regular gas is about $3.47 per gallon. And so here's what this will look like in terms of quote-unquote average transportation costs. According to the living wage calculator created at MIT, if you're a single adult without children, you'll spend about $5,500 for transportation in Fairfax annually. If you and your family are a family of 4, including 2 working adults and 2 children, you're probably going to pay about $15,000 for transportation each year. Now here we throw all these numbers at you, and you're probably thinking the same thing that I was thinking at this point. How do you define an inexpensive meal for $18 a meal? Or what is an average meal for 3 people without alcohol and dessert? My average meal could be the Happy Meal down the street at the local McDonald's. Your average meal could be the filet mignon at the nearest steakhouse. Right? How do you define average? Or how do you come at this number where $15,000 is the magic number for a family of 4 in transportation costs annually? I don't know. My point is this: while these numbers, these general numbers that are given in terms of how much it costs to live in Virginia, Northern Virginia in particular, are important, it may not give you a picture as you want for cost of living until you begin to compare that to other cities that are similar, not as good, but similar, as Northern Virginia. That way, if we use the relative data, it's not going to matter how you define average or how I define average. The way that each of us define average is going to buy the same exact thing, whether you're here in Northern Virginia or in New York City or Miami or San Francisco, wherever. Right? That way, when we compare our relative cost of living here in Northern Virginia to somewhere else, you get a better idea of how much it's going to cost you to live here. Now, if you're not sure what that means, hit pause, rewind, watch it again, and think about it for a minute. This is a breakdown of the costs for a family of 4, including 2 adults and 2 children, that we get from the EPI Family Budget Calculator, EPI standing for the Economic Public Institute. Now, if you look at this chart, we've arranged it from cheapest cost of living or lowest cost of living, depending on how you want to look at it, on the left, and it increases to the right. So as you can tell, these are kind of some cities that other people consider moving to when they go to Fairfax. Austin, Denver, Seattle, Fairfax, Boston, New York, San Francisco. Just keep this in mind as a reference. Austin is definitely the cheapest at $77,000 a year annually. At the other end of the spectrum, San Francisco is basically double at almost $160,000 per year. Fairfax actually falls right smack dab in the middle of these 7 cities, as you can see highlighted in green. So one conclusion that we can find from this data in particular is that while it's not the cheapest place to live in the country, Fairfax County, Virginia, or Northern Virginia, it's also not the most expensive, especially considering what you get in this area and just by living here. The other thing, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, is that while this chart shows that it's kind of in the mid-tier expense level, if you want to go a little bit cheaper to decrease your cost of living, the diversity here presented in this geographical area of Northern Virginia, specifically Fairfax County, Virginia, it allows for you to control your cost of living a little bit so you can decrease that cost of living while enjoying the same amenities of the greater Northern Virginia area. So hopefully now you have a better idea of what it actually costs to live here in Northern Virginia. If you have any other questions about living in Northern Virginia, relocating to Northern Virginia, investing in Northern Virginia, buying and selling, anything else related to Northern Virginia, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm just a text or an email away. We can connect directly, and I'm happy to serve you in whatever way I can. Thanks.